The fallout continues from the release of more January 6 tapes, the continued interviews that are coming out of Tucker Carlson's show. Yesterday, we played you Senator Chuck Schumer taking to the Senate floor to demand that Rupert Murdoch and Fox News not allow Tucker Carlson to air these videos, which is an unbelievable moment in government censorship when you have the majority leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer of New York, demanding that Rupert Murdoch, who owns a private business, not allow his Fox News organization to share accurate video that is the people's property from inside of the Capitol surrounding January 6th, which is one of the biggest media events in Democrat history. In fact, according to Democrats, what happened on January 6th, and Buck, I cannot believe that they continue to say this, but they have gone all in with the talking point that January 6th is the most dangerous day in America since the Civil War. Not 9/11, not World War II, not World War I, not, frankly, any number of more dangerous moments in our nation's history, but a 2-hour window where virtually no one was armed and most people entered in and behaved peacefully in the Capitol. They might have trespassed. That this is actually the most dangerous moment since the Civil War. And if you think I'm exaggerating, this is literally what Karine Jean-Pierre said yesterday in the White House press briefing. Listen.
He said the mob was orderly and meek and that they were tourists instead of insurrectionists. What's your response to Carlson and to Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who granted him access to that video?
Anybody who watched that video would strongly disagree. Anybody who watched that video with their own eyes in a real way and saw what happened on that day would disagree with what was just stated. The president has been very clear. January 6th was the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War, and we should be focused on making sure that never happens again.
So notice the attack on our democracy, the turn of phrase that is always used here. Because if they said the worst attack on America, that is just completely insane, right? I mean, because they said since the Civil War, not even the worst attack on America since 9/11, let's say. The worst attack since the Civil War. So you're saying Pearl Harbor, nothing compared to the people we saw walking around taking selfies. And yes, people who were shoving and pushing at cops. I'm sorry, I'm not going to listen to any Democrats whine about how awful it was what the cops were put through that day unless they were right there with us through months of police officers. It was official policy, or rather the official plan, I should say, of Antifa out in Portland to try to blind officers with lasers shined in their eyes. They were trying to do that. It was official tactic and procedure, or rather the common tactic and procedure of some of these BLM and Antifa riot groups all through the summer to throw bottles of urine, bricks, rocks. There were shots fired at some of the BLM riots, and cops, as you could see, would regularly have to engage in physical confrontation at the riots that broke out the summer of 2020. The only time that I can think of in the last decade that Democrats have been upset about the violence that police officers face from a mob is January 6th. Every other time it's, hey, this is just democracy in action, man. This is just, BLM is about justice, it's about social justice and racial equity and all this other stuff. They weren't complaining about what was happening. There were officers injured. There was billions of dollars of damage done. They also made a huge effort to try to separate out the five officers killed in Dallas back under the Obama administration by the first BLM version, right? Black Lives Matter, a guy who acted on the idea that police officers were murdering unarmed black men. He went out and killed 5 Dallas officers, as we saw. Some of it was on video. So all of a sudden they care so much about violence against cops. We know it's completely situational ethics from Democrats. And even just the way they use these terms, the attack on our democracy. Well, I could sit here and make a very strong case that when you have the FBI, the DOJ, elements of the rest of the intelligence community, the CIA, the Democrat media, all aligned in a lie that even uses, through FISA warrants, the intelligence capabilities of the federal government to try a soft coup against Donald Trump in 2016. Isn't that a big attack on our democracy? They tried to undo the election with a huge lie, and they used FISA, for heaven's sake, to do it. And we're supposed to forget about that, Clay.
Buck, what I would love to hear from Democrats this 2 hours of trespassing. In what way did these individuals come close to overthrowing American democracy? That's the question that nobody can ever answer. And I think it's important, again, to reiterate, everyone who protests and breaks the law, regardless of their politics, should be prosecuted, which is what you and I have argued since the George Floyd protests started in May. Your motivations to break the law when it comes to protest, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever your political motivations are, they're unacceptable, right? Don't break the law.
We haven't changed one bit. I mean, from the very beginning, from the day of, Clay, the people who were there protesting, God bless them. They were upset about the election. They think bad things happen. The people who obeyed the law, God bless them. There's nothing wrong with that. That's to be celebrated. People that broke the law through, and I'm not now. There are three categories here, right? There was entirely within the scope of the law, which was a vast majority of all the protesters who were in D.C. that day on this issue. I don't know what the percentage would be, but 95%, 98%, something like that. Okay, those are just people that are exercising their First Amendment rights. As American as you're going to get, that's fine and great and good and no issues there at all, right? Then you have the people who walked in, didn't really know what, and that's what you see on these videos. Cops are kind of waving them in. They didn't attack anybody. They didn't do. All of a sudden, the cops are kind of parting the way, and there are people going into the Capitol. They're walking around. They're being treated like domestic terrorists. But when you really look at it, what do they really do? I mean, it's a question of whether it should be even considered illegal at all in my mind. That's the gray area. The people that you and I have to be very, stern with are anybody who, if you broke windows, if you destroyed things, if you acted like Antifa and you attacked cops, not only did you break the law, which is wrong, you helped Democrats. And this is what I said that day. The people that were throwing punches at cops, I know they thought that they were doing something for their country or whatever. They broke the law, which was wrong, and they were helping the worst elements of the Democrat Party, which is obvious because here we are to this day still having to talk about this. And they used this with effect in the 2022 elections. We thought it wouldn't be I thought people would realize that it was all hyperbole and it was crazy. But, the way that they were talking about it as an insurrection, but it was effective politics. And so that's why Karine Jean-Pierre continues to lie and say, it's not. Is it a lie? No. Is it insane to say this is the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War? Yeah, it's a crazy statement.
Because 9/11 and Pearl Harbor, at a minimum, were attacks on the American democracy, right? They wanted to overtake and overthrow America to the best of their ability. So, look, my thing on this is, and I wish the argument would actually continue, when all these MSNBC and CNN talking heads and Karine Jean-Pierre, like if we had her on now, okay, it was 2 hours of rioting, looting, pillaging, whatever you want to say, a tiny pinprick of the stuff that BLM did. In what way was it an attack on democracy? Like, in order for something to be an attack on democracy, there have to be casualties. The only casualty that day was Ashley Babbitt and an unarmed protester. There have to be lots of weapons, right? What was used in a violent fashion inside of the Capitol? And there has to be a goal, right? Like, what was the goal of Jan 6? Like, what did people accomplish, and what could they have ever accomplished? These are things that actually matter in terms of the severity and the significance of this incident. And, Buck, if we could go back and wave a magic wand, let's pretend that no one ever enters the Capitol on January 6th. and there's just, kind of a frenzy outside. What did Democrats even talk about? What percentage of their public commentary has relied on January 6th and threats to democracy since that day as their calling card for why they need power?
This is the constant defense principle, unfortunately, in action. The constantly on defense principle, which was applied to the Trump administration, because instead of getting to talk about how things were going when Trump was in office, which was overall phenomenally well, great economy, at peace, things were fantastic. Instead of being able to focus on that and push the agenda even more, there was so much energy from that White House. And you and I both know this from people who were working in the White House at all levels, junior staffers all the way up to the president himself. Trump told me about the Russia collusion thing was driving everybody in his White House crazy, but they had to constantly play defense on it. And now with the Biden administration in office, you know what happens again? The Republicans are having to play defense on this January 6th thing. And that's the whole game that the media plays. Even if it's not true, we have to sit here and spend time saying they're exaggerating or they're lying or they're misrepresenting it. And that's not time that we point out Joe Biden is an incompetent fool, and the agenda of the Democrats might as well be written by AOC and Bernie Sanders because Joe Biden is a fraud. He's actually doing the agenda that the far left Democrats want. He just puts this, oh, I'm old Joe Biden, you can trust me, I'm one of the folks, his whole routine as some kind of facade. But we don't get to talk about that. We end up talking about January 6th. We're always on defense, and that's how they want it. So this is why, I think on the one hand, their exaggerations it's encouraging because they don't have a good story to tell. The Biden White House doesn't have anything to tout as an accomplishment. But then the other side of it, they're going to use this. They're going to use this throughout the election cycle coming up. And every moment that we're talking about January 6th wasn't, and we're not talking to this audience, right? This audience already knows it wasn't an insurrection. Trying to convince the people in the middle, trying to convince people who are convincible, who are persuadable. Whenever we're saying it's not an insurrection, we're playing defense. That's the problem we face.
I do think Tucker's playing a little bit of offense by sharing these videos, because I think that's what has the Democrats rattled, is as some of these videos circulate and start to go viral, it does lead, I think you're right, Buck, and this is always in my head who I'm thinking to talk to. I'm trying to talk to people who can lead to landslide victories, people who are persuadable. I think it does make people who are persuadable take a step back. I think it ties in with COVID, and I think there are a lot of people who say, wait a minute, how often is the government lying to me? There are a lot of people getting red-pilled every day, and I think when you watch a video of the QAnon shaman walking around surrounded by 9 police officers, and you've heard this guy was trying to overthrow the United States government, and you've got a police officer trying to open the door to the Senate floor for him, I think you definitely contemplate, wait a minute, is this guy really a threat to democracy? Was this officer actually killed? Most Democrats believe that there were multiple officers who were killed that day. But when you start to look and you say, wait, Sicknick was just used as a prop? He didn't die that day? They laid his body in state so they could walk through and claim this? I think it does start to set off a little bit of alarm bells and build to the point where you say, I can't trust the Biden administration.
I mean, that would be success from what Tucker is able to do here, because much to my tremendous frustration, January 6th was helpful to Democrats in 2022. Very frustrating, folks, but we have to look at the reality. Democrats held those hearings. Yeah, we look at it and we say these people are nuts. They weren't speaking to us. They weren't talking to you and me and everybody listening to this right now. They were talking to people who have a passing familiarity with what happened that day, and maybe they'll vote, maybe they won't, maybe they'll go Republican, maybe they'll go Democrat, and that's going to matter a lot in 2024. We always want to give you the fullest perspective possible on all these stories we're talking about, and that includes the response to the January 6th footage that Tucker Carlson has showed on Fox. It's not just Democrats who are out there saying, oh my gosh, what's going on? You have Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell never misses an opportunity to help Democrats at the expense of Republicans when the heat gets turned on. Unless it's an issue of judges, Mitch McConnell cannot be counted on. Well, actually, he can be counted on by the other side, so we can't count on him. Here he is, play 5.
My concern is how it was depicted, which is a different issue. clearly, the chief of the Capitol Police, in my view, correctly describes what most of us witnessed firsthand on January 6th. So that's my reaction to it. It was a mistake, in my view, for Fox News to depict this in a way that's completely at variance with what our chief law enforcement official here at the Capitol thinks.
With friends like Mitch, Clay.
I get so utterly disgusted at, there's so many words I want to use. What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
Like, if you're Mitch McConnell, what is the goal of this answer? You know the media hates you. Buck, what did I just show you? Maybe we'll bring this up when we come back, but we'll talk with, certainly with Jim Jordan. But they're not in good faith asking questions of you. So from my perspective, for anybody out there who's a Republican politician, they hate you. If someone who hates you is asking you questions, why are you in good faith responding to them at all as if they are legitimate journalists? It's embarrassing, frankly, that Mitch McConnell would have this take, but it's all too common.
Yeah, why help the communists?
Yes.
You know? Why tell Stalin that he's well-dressed today? Like, what's the point? I don't understand.
Yeah.